Hello and welcome to another basics tutorial in Blender, and today we'll be focusing on how to move yourself around your 3D scene in Blender and also how to move objects around in Blender. So let's begin. Alright, here's a basic Blender scene I set up with lights and some objects, and we are currently looking through the perspective camera through the viewport. As you can see on the top left hand corner, user perspective, which indicates we are looking through the perspective camera. So how do we start moving this camera? By using hotkeys and definitely practice and a 3-button mouse. As you can see over on the bottom left hand corner over here, there's a 3-button mouse, and this indicator will actually show you what I'm actually pressing right now, including keys on my keyboard. So in case you miss whatever I'm saying, you can actually pause the video to have a look at what hotkeys I'm actually using. So without further ado, how do we start by moving around the viewport? The first hotkey I'm going to show you is the middle mouse button. So with your mouse hovering inside the viewport, hold down the middle mouse button to rotate around an invisible point. So this is the first one. Second, to move up, down, left, right, we want to hold shift and hold down the middle mouse button and move your mouse around the viewport. As you can see, this is how you translate the camera. So we've already learned rotation, and now we have translation. And the last one we're going to learn is to zoom in and out. So hold down Ctrl and hold your middle mouse button and move your mouse up and down to move in and out of the zoom. If your 3-button mouse has a scroll wheel, you can use the scroll wheel shortcut by just scrolling the wheel to zoom in and out. So that's a quick way as well. Alright, so that's really the basics of how to move around in the viewport. And with some practice, you'll be able to move around as quick as this, or maybe even quicker. So do practice. Get a lot of practice, and at some point you are going to realize that you may have a problem focusing on a single object, like what I have here right now. So as you can see, when I'm holding down the middle mouse button and it's sort of rotating around some invisible point, right? And what's going to happen is that when you start moving your camera around for too long, that point will actually move around the 3D space, and it may not be where you think you want it to be. So for example, I would think that my invisible point is actually here, but it's actually not when I rotate. And how do you get back to a point? You would want to focus on an object. And how do you do that? Click on the object you want and press the period key on your numpad. So what happens is that your camera will be focused onto the object, and just by zooming out a bit, you can actually start to recalibrate your view again. So whenever you lose calibration of your view, you can always select an object in the scene, press the period key with your numpad, and it will recalibrate the center point back to where your selection is. Alright, so enough about moving around in 3D space. How about changing views from perspective view to orthographic views? So what are orthographic views? They're basically views that have no perspective. So for example, what you're seeing here is a cube, right? And a cube is what you see in 3D space. But when you're in an orthographic view, let's say the top view over here as indicated by in the top left hand corner over here, top orthographic 180 degrees, you see that your cube has no longer any perspective and it's now a square. So that's what perspective and orthographic views mean. So how do I jump really quickly between these two views instead of going to the gimbal over here on the top right hand corner here? There's actually a keyboard shortcut which involves you holding the Alt button, middle mouse button, and swiping your mouse really quickly. Now this one will take a bit of practice. It actually took me a while as well, but this is going to help you move into orthographic views really quickly. So as you can see here, it's hold down the Alt button, and when you're pressing the middle mouse button down, you will quickly swipe up and down or left and right on your mouse to enable these different orthographic views. So moving on, how do we actually move objects inside the scene? We've already learned how to move the camera, but now we have to learn how to move the objects. So the first step is to, of course, select your object. As you can see, whatever is selected will be highlighted by a yellow orangey outline around the object. And what you want to do is to remember these 3 keys, or with your toolbar enabled by pressing T, you can always go here to see the 3 main transform controls, which is move, rotate, and scale. But of course, we are not going to use the toolbar because it takes a lot of time to just go in here to click and then move. So how do we do it? We use hotkeys, and the hotkey for move is G, R for rotate, and S for scale. So as you saw just now, when we actually moved and rotated the object or even scaled it, the movement actually, doesn't have any control to it. So we're actually rotating it in a random direction that we cannot control, and that is quite useless, to be honest, unless you are placing things around randomly. So I'm going to show you a technique that will allow you to quickly move objects along axes. So as you can see, this is the X and Y axis as marked by those red and green lines. And there is a hidden blue line which you can't see right now, but it's actually heading upwards, as you can see here in this gimbal. And we can actually move our objects along these 3 axes in 3D. So the technique for the move button is when you press G, and when you hold down your middle mouse button, you can actually see a white line that appears in the middle of the box or the object that you select. And what happens is that when you move that white line to align it with the axis lines, which is the red, green, and blue line, it will sort of snap to it, and you can move your objects in the 3 different axes that you want. So for example, if I wanted to move my box in the X axis, I'll just snap it to the X axis and I'll just let it go. I'll just let go my middle mouse button and press the left mouse button to confirm the movement, and there you go. So this is going to take a bit of practice, especially if you're new to this whole 3 button mouse thing. But this is going to really accelerate how you're going to move objects in 3D space really quickly. So the same thing goes for the rotation as well. So for rotation and scaling, you can also do the same thing by pressing R and then middle mouse button to select the axis you want to rotate, or if you want to scale, hold down the middle mouse button to select the axis you want to scale in. Unfortunately, I do not use this method at all, as I will make use of the screen right hand corner property menu, which will be accessed by the N key to bring out, and in the item tab under transform, you can actually put in some values here, which I find much more useful for my use case, especially modeling your house. And this is what I would recommend for you when you start to build objects around for your house and placing them in the house. So yeah, thank you for watching this. I hope this basic tutorial will generally guide you how to move around Blender really quickly and how to move objects inside Blender. I hope this will help you for the larger tutorials that I'm doing on the house building. So yeah, see you around.